Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Collin Makamson. I am the Assistant Director of Education for Curriculum here at the National World War II Museum. And I want to thank you all for joining us today for the first of a weekly series of K through 12 webinars we'll be doing every Thursday at noon Central Time, all the way through December. So whether I'm coming to you from coming to you in your classroom or coming to you at your new classroom of a desk in your living room or your kitchen table, we're happy you can join us today to take a look at some of the highlights from the museum's education artifact collection. So I'm here at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. Great place, full of lots and lots of cool stuff, lots and lots of cool artifacts from 70, 75 years ago. And we're going to be looking at some of those here in a second. But before we do that, I wanted to talk a little bit about what a museum is and what artifacts are. A museum can be big or small, just like artifacts can be big or small. Artifacts are just a fancy term for something from the past that can tell us about the person or the time in which it was created. Artifacts can be big things here at the museum, tanks and planes. They can be small things like a button or a shoelace. No one artifact is better or worse than another. It all depends on the questions that you ask the artifact. And now question, I don't mean you hold up the button or shoelace and talk to it, but looking at it and seeing how it's made, what it's made out of, what you see, what you don't see. So I'm going to be asking you to put your thinking caps on when we look at these artifacts. And I have with me my colleague Kate Fitzgerald, who's going to be taking some of your questions in the Q&A function in our Zoom broadcast today. This broadcast is being recorded, so if you can't join us live, we're happy you're catching us on the rebroadcast as well. So I'll be asking you some questions, but if you have anything for me, you don't have to wait until the very end of our broadcast. You can type in your question in the Q&A function, and Kate will get it out to me. So without further ado, let's wander and take a look at some of the artifacts in our collection. So first order of business, everybody. We work in a museum, I work in a museum, and I am going to be showing off some artifacts from the museum's education collection. Now, you see my hands. That's a no-no. Anytime we're handling artifacts, me, a museum professional, or you handling any of these artifacts that may be out on a table or may be mailed out in these boxes, we always want to make sure that we take great care to preserve them. We working in museums, we want to preserve history, not destroy it. So I'm going to put on a pair of gloves to protect my hands and also to protect these artifacts, because on our skin, all of us have a layer of oil that's good for our skin. It keeps it healthy, fights off infection, but over time, repeated handling of these artifacts without gloves can really, really damage them. It can smudge paper, it can really leave stains on some of these things, and we want to preserve history, not destroy it. So I'm going to put on my gloves, and we're going to start taking a look at some of these artifacts from the education collection. We're doing this for a lot of reasons. We want to be in classrooms and support teachers and students, but also this box, for some of you who may be familiar with our Operation Footlocker program, a lot of these artifacts we mail out in these footlockers to schools and classrooms for students to investigate and handle. Obviously, with the situation right now in the pandemic, we're not mailing things out so much. So we thought we would show off some of the contents in our footlocker case here for you now. And we're going to start with some things that are small that can still tell us a whole lot about the time they were created 75 years ago in the middle of World War II. So I'm going to move our trunk over, and we'll start with these. So we'll zoom in and we'll take a look at these things that were really, really universal in World War II. We see them now on soldiers or American troops who are still serving. We also see them as, sometimes giveaways at sports games or musicians wearing them. But these are pairs of dog tags. So what this is, every soldier who served in World War II was issued a set of dog tags. Now, why? on these dog tags has a lot of really, really important information on there. We see a serviceman's name. We see his next of kin, that is his relative, maybe his mom or dad or wife, husband. We also see important information about when they got their shots, because it was important for soldiers to make sure that their bodies had all of their immune system boosters, because soldiers from the United States were being sent to Europe, North Africa, Asia. And also on here, there's a little letter on the side of these things. And sometimes you might have a C on these, sometimes you might have a P, or sometimes you might have an H. So C, P, and H. I'm going to say, if you guys have an idea of what those might stand for, you can maybe type into the chat, or to say what you think C, P, and H might mean on a set of dog tags from World War II. Take a second. All right. So C, P, and H on dog tags in World War II, those indicated the wearer's religion. So we have C for Catholic, P for Protestant, and H for Hebrew or Jewish. So that's how these things were denotated on these World War II dog tags. Very, very cool, and can tell you a whole lot. And again, look at them holding in my hands. Not very big, but if you know what to look for on these set of dog tags, you can learn a whole lot from them.
Hey, Colin, we have a question coming in from Leah, and she wants to know, why would they put someone's religion on their dog tags?
That's a great question, Kate. Thank you. It's important to, if a soldier during World War II or any time is injured, seriously hurt, sick, has to go home, or it's war, someone passing away in service, to know what member of clergy to perhaps consult. So if someone is very sick, very, very dangerously injured, or someone even passes away, to know what type of religious ceremony they would prefer. Wanting to be sensitive to everyone's desires, to have a Catholic funeral or a Lutheran service, or also even how they're buried in a cemetery. We see lots of cemeteries, especially World War II cemeteries, of people who passed away in service. We see those white crosses. But also, if you walk along, you'll also see Stars of David. And military cemeteries today, you'll see Christian headstones, you'll see Muslim headstones, really denotating the vast and varied and very diverse armed forces we have today. Great question, thanks. So we're going to keep it small, small ball for a second, and also take a look at something here. One of these things, I'm sure, I'm not going to insult your intelligence. Our student audiences are always very, very smart. We're going to zoom in on this. Everyone can recognize what that is as it comes into focus. That is your everyday, Lincoln head penny, ho-hum, who cares? So we'll put next to it, sidle up to it, we see another penny. And they're very, very different. One is brownish and the other is silver. And let's look at another weird property of that silver penny, that unusual penny. I have in my hand a magnet. Now, copper, we know that's not magnetic, not reacting to it at all. Now, what about this silver penny? What do we think is going to happen? It sticks right to it. So this is a penny. This isn't some nickel that's been miscast. This is a penny from World War II. It's a penny made out of steel. So in World War II, you have to think all of the things the United States needed to fight and win the war successfully. It needed tanks and planes and jeeps and half-tracks and trucks. And all of those things have inside of them electrical wiring. And so the United States needed tons and tons and tons of copper. That was what was used to make the wiring for the inside of a lot of these vehicles, trucks, and things to get our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines around. So for a year, the United States says, we can't be using the copper to make pennies. We'll cast these pennies in steel instead. Again, looking at it on the surface, kind of ho-hum, but if you know the right questions to ask it, you can learn a lot about the home front in World War II, about people making do, doing without, so our armed forces had everything they needed to win. So yeah, really cool steel penny and a copper penny. And now, especially, I want you to put on your thinking caps. I said I'd be asking you some questions, putting you through your paces. This is kind of tricky because on the surface, this doesn't look super impressive. I have here in this container just some rocks or pebbles, but these are special rocks, special pebbles, made of a very special material that didn't exist before World War II. It didn't exist actually until the final year of World War II, 1945. These materials, these sort of crystallized greenish colored rocks, does anyone have an idea of what those might be? If you have a guess, and again, there are no stupid answers. If you have a guess of what you think those might be, you can type that into the chat as well.
You had a guess of moon rocks.
Oh, you're very close in terms of some of the people who worked on the project that made these rocks were also some of the people who took us to the moon later in the 1950s and 60s. So there is a relationship, but they're not from the moon. These are from our planet, planet Earth. Anybody else have an idea of what they might be? All right, it is kind of tricky and it is kind of tough. But believe it or not, what I'm holding in my hand here, again, wearing my gloves so I'm safe, these are leftover materials from the test of the first atomic bomb. So the Manhattan Project, the race to harness the power of the atom to make a nuclear bomb or weapon was won by the United States in 1945, and the prototypes of these devices that would be used to end the war in the Pacific against Japan were tested in the deserts of the Southwest United States. So they had a test of the bomb first to make sure it worked at a place called Alamogordo. And they tested the device, it worked, and it worked so well that it liquefied with its immense heat the top layer of sand where this weapon was tested. And these rocks are the remainder of this crystallized substance, this glass-like rock substance that melted under the immense heat of the atomic bomb, and it's called trinitite, named after the Trinity test that produced them. So when I said it's related to moon rocks, and I said that was a good guess, some of the same scientists, technicians, engineers who helped win the atomic race for the United States in World War II were still working in NASA in the 1950s and 60s to help take Americas into space and to the moon. So we're going to look at some bigger things now from our artifact trunks and see what we can find. I always like this to start out with because, again, just showing you what you have to work with and the questions you can ask. Something that looks very regular, very average, can actually tell us a whole lot. So we zoom out, we see here something that's kind of greenish brown, called olive drab or army green. And we can see holding it up, we see a set of buttons here, we see some pant legs here. So these are not, long pants, these are short pants in army green. Now, these were used in World War II. They're army green. Do you guys think, watching there on my screen, do you think these were worn over a soldier's uniform, or were these worn underneath a soldier's uniform? Do you have a guess? You can type that in the chat of, do you think a soldier wore these over his uniform or underneath his uniform?
Well, Colin, Talon has guessed that they are a pantsuit.
It's whereas today, maybe today we might have this might be appropriate. During World War II, most soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines wore long shirts, long pants, long jackets. It could be very hot, and underneath their uniforms they wore these. So this is a piece of U.S. Army underwear from 75 years ago. So they're clean, I promise. I'm wearing gloves anyway, so it doesn't matter. But besides the goofy aspect of, yeah, I'm holding a soldier's underwear from 75 years ago, you can look at an artifact like this too and find out about the time in which it was created. Think about the United States during World War II. 16 million Americans were either volunteering or drafted to fight in World War II. Forget about tanks and guns and ammo. We had to make sure our soldiers had enough shoes, socks, pairs of underwear. So in making all of these things, we had to make sure that we conserved resources whenever we could. Conservation is big now. It was big in World War II as well. So here on our set of underwear, we don't see metal buttons or a zipper. We see instead wooden buttons or mother of pearl buttons. That was just saying, hey, we can replace these metal buttons or zipper and save some of that metal that can be put into the war effort. That is, can be used to make bullets, or can be used scrap metal that can be harnessed to make sheet metal or armament for tanks or planes. We also don't see an elastic waistband. We see drawstrings used to tighten or loosen this set of underwear. On the same token, I want to grab another artifact and I'll place it right on top since they're somewhat related. All right, everyone knows what this is that I placed on top of my piece of Army underwear. We know this is a license plate. License plates then do what license plates do now. They go on a car and they have information that says, you know, who owns the car and how it's registered with the state. This is from the state of Illinois of 1943. But thinking about that Army pair of underwear and what they didn't use, license plates today are made out of metal. What do you think this license plate is made out of? Any guesses? You can put them right in the chat of what you think this license plate from World War II might be made out of.
Colin, Julia is guessing wood.
Well, Julia, you're very, very, very close. So this is a special type of almost wood-like material called press board or fiber board. If you have, any of your parents have furniture from IKEA, very, very similar in structure to that. And again, just like you replaced that zipper and the buttons to help conserve metal for the war effort, the US government said, hey, why are we making these license plates out of metal when we could make them out of press board just as easily? So again, something simple, but a way that Americans, all Americans, not just those fighting, could feel like they were helping support the war effort by doing with less so our soldiers would have enough. Talking about our soldiers, some of the things they carried. This is one of the things I always like to show and talk about. Is what our soldiers were eating, drinking, and really keeping them alive. So what I have is I have a soldier's dinner kit. So this is what a soldier might have for a meal, and we're going to unpack to see what type of things, what type of cuisine they were enjoying. So this is a U.S. Army Field K ration, a D unit, a dinner unit. And on the front, you can see it has everything that this meal kit came with. So let's unpack and see what we got. Now I'll unpack it and save the best for last. So we have a packet of crackers, which are probably nice and stale, probably not fit for human consumption anymore. We have a pack of instant coffee, keeping our soldiers alert, helping something we have in common with our veterans from 75 years ago. I know most of the museum here runs on this stuff. Coffee, very, very important. Let's see what else we have. We have a U.S. Field Ration D, a D bar, so a bar of chocolate. Now, this isn't something you'd want to eat unless you had absolutely no choice. It's really, really high in calories, but the reason you wouldn't want to eat it is it doesn't taste very good. And that was done deliberately. That is, when they were putting this field kit together, saying, We want to make sure we can give our soldiers something that gives them a lot of calories and can keep them fighting, keep them moving for as long as possible. But we don't want them to be popping it out of their pocket and eating it when they don't have to. So this is for emergencies only. So a couple more of these D bars, stacking them right up here. Some more crackers, and something very important piece of material here. It's made by the Waldorf company of Chester, Pennsylvania, for the U.S. Army. It's made out of paper, very important. Does anyone have a guess of what you think this might be? Anybody has a guess, you can put it into the chat.
Tissues, Colin?
It's very close to tissues. Again, very important. Wherever our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines found themselves, it's your toilet paper. So here you have it right here. Yeah, not a lot. But again, simple things, small things that you can look at. It doesn't have to be a B-17 or a machine gun or a battleship. It's looking at these artifacts and knowing what questions to ask them. And they can really tell you a lot about the time in which they were made. Again, we don't see this kit's made out of metal. It's made out of cardboard. So again, wanting to save resources as much as they can.
Colin, how come things aren't made out of plastic like a lot of things you would get in 2020?
That's a great question about why we are not using things made out of plastic. So there were the beginnings of plastics during World War II. But that base material that most plastic is made out of comes from oil or petroleum. So we needed a lot of oil as well for all of our ships, all of our planes, for gasoline. So all of those things we needed as well. So we tried to conserve oil to make sure that our armed forces got first crack at it. In fact, talking about that license plate, I should have mentioned something I'm going to show next. Is there was a concept during World War II of rationing. That is a restriction on how much stuff that you as a civilian could have. There was a restriction and rations on food items, on how many pairs of new clothes you could get, even a ration and restriction on how much gas you could put in your car. So really determining how far or how close to home you had to stay.
And Colin, we want to shout out to Talon because he has gotten ahead of us and he is guessing that we are looking at a flag currently.
Talon, you should take over. You should come run this program for me. You're right. We are looking at a flag dead center right in front of us. However, you saw me pull it, place it on the table. This is not a flag you'd fly on a flagpole. It's much too small. And it's also, it's not sturdy enough. It would almost blow away, or it wouldn't really survive out in the elements. And you can see too as well, I have my gloves on, like we're talking about keeping our artifacts safe. You can see a lot of these things, artifacts from 75 years ago. You can tell they are old. They're kind of a bit frayed. They have some blemishes, some stains on them. So we try to reduce that as much as possible when items come to the museum. We want to take care of them. So yeah, we have a flag here. It's too small to fly on a flagpole. And it's not, an American flag has 50 stars on it. We see here a red and white field with 2 stars on it, 2 blue stars. Does anyone want to take a guess about what we think these 2 stars might represent on this small flag and where you might see it and why? That's a lot of questions. What do you think it is mainly? If anyone has a guess, you can put it right in the chat.
I don't know, Colin, you may have stumped our audience on this one.
All right, well, this is kind of tricky. This is a flag, Talon, you are correct. But this is a special type of flag that you still see sometimes today, but you saw a lot in World War II. This is called a service flag. And you wouldn't see it hanging on a flagpole, but you would see it hanging on a door or a window of a household that had family members serving in the armed forces. The number of stars you would see on a flag represents how many servicemen and women that household had serving in the war effort. So this household that this service flag came from had 2. You can also tell something about this flag by the color of the stars. So this household, and this represented by this service flag, has 2 people serving in the armed forces, and we can tell they're both still alive because the color of the stars are blue. If you walked by a household and you saw a window and you saw a gold star on a flag. That meant someone in that family or that household had passed away in service. They had been killed serving their country in World War II. So you could walk through whole neighborhoods and you'd see windows filled with these service flags of blue and yellow stars. You could tell who in a neighborhood or communities, who family members had made the ultimate sacrifice during World War II. So a service flag.
And while Colin is getting the next artifact, we encourage you to talk to whoever you live with, or grandparents or something like that, to see maybe if you have artifacts in your closets or attics that you don't even know about. You might have an old service flag from World War II. And if you find anything, let us know here at the museum that you watched the program and then you went and found your own artifacts. And we'd love to hear about what you found.
Absolutely. The great thing about World War II history is almost every person's family was touched by it. It doesn't have to be someone you know who served in World War II. It can be someone who experienced the war on the home front. That is not fighting, but experiencing the war back in the United States. Experiencing the war as someone going to school, a student, experiencing the war as a child who had to do without, had Christmases or birthdays that looked very, very different in some of the toys or gifts that were given. Or even someone who spent their time working in a factory, making things from the war effort. We saw big shifts in population of people moving, especially where we are in the South, leaving there and moving to the major manufacturing centers of the Midwest and the East Coast for good paying defense contract jobs.
And Colin, Julia actually mentioned, and I personally can agree with this, that she learned about Blue Star and Gold Star flags from reading the American Girl doll books, especially the Molly book. So we are so excited that you made that connection, because a lot of us here at the museum also learned that. And
go ahead, Kate.
Talon, once again, he's coming through guessing that this might be a ration book.
It is indeed. This is, we're talking about that process that that practice of rationing a little bit earlier, looking at our license plate. This is indeed a ration book. So it's kind of hard to wrap your head around now of how every aspect of your daily life was touched by World War II in some way or another. So even down to how much food an individual or a household could consume. So we know about saving metal for the war effort, saving gasoline for the war effort, but even saving food and restricting certain food items such as sugar, butter, coffee. All of those were restricted starting in 1942, the second year of America's involvement in World War II. And this is a ration book. Every person in a household would get one, from the youngest newborn to the oldest member of your family. And inside these ration books, which on the front, it has your information, where you lived, and very stern language saying don't lose it or there'll be a penalty. Inside these, you see stamps. And these stamps have numbers on them. And food items you would get at a butcher shop, a grocery store, a supermarket, they had a value in dollars, but they also had a value in stamps as well. So you had to present the item's value in dollars, but then also its value in ration stamps as well. And you had to keep up with this. You had to know how many ration stamps you had left. If you ran out of ration stamps, well, too bad. Uncle Sam's not going to come bail you out. So it was important to save food, but people also supplemented their diets and their shopping with rations by planting victory gardens, growing their own food. So food you grew yourself or that were in victory gardens were not subject to the rationing service. And this is actually from someone, a ration book from someone named Mary, who is here in, was age 45 and lived in Louisville, which I can imagine is probably Louisville, Kentucky. So again, even looking at things of looking at someone's last name, what street they grew up on, when they were born, just putting yourself more in the time of World War II. We'll look at a couple more of these things, and then I'll see if we have more questions before we close. So, sticking with that theme of rationing, about what we had and what we didn't have, we have here just a wooden toy, a wooden boxcar. This is from the Chicago and Northwestern Railway, a refrigerator car on the Chicago and Northwest line. again, talking about saving things, conserving things, we don't see a lot of metal on this toy. So even childhood, growing up, forget about fighting in World War II, even toys or playtime would be much, much different. We see this is made mostly of wood. The wheels are made of wood. We see a tiny, tiny little bit of metal for the wheel's axles and its coupling to attach it to probably what was once a full train set. So even looking at something that may on its surface look, oh, that's a toy, that's for babies. Yeah, it is. But also looking at it through the eyes of a historian, like you guys have been doing on our call today, and then what we do at the museum all the time, looking at what an artifact like this can tell us about, sure, what people played with and had fun with back 70, 75 years ago, but what also we don't see. We don't see a heck of a lot of metal on this thing because it was important to use that metal to make sure it went to the war effort first. I'm going to look at a couple more things and then I'll take your questions here. Zoom out just a tad. Perfect. So we have three small books on our screen here. They say Italian, German, and French. Anybody have an idea what these books might be used for? It's written there in the bottom, but why do you think our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines would be given books on German, Italian, or French? Why do you think they were given these things? Or what do you think these things are? Who used them? And yeah, why were they given to them? Anyone has an idea, you can put it directly into the chat.
So we have a guess that they might be passports.
They're passport size, aren't they? They very much look like a passport. Related to, I mean, they are definitely about our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines were traveling to far exotic locales away from the United States. And they're also traveling and fighting in Europe. And we see these three books are languages spoken primarily in Europe. So our American fighting force, very, very young men and women, most of whom had not traveled to Europe before, probably didn't speak the language of the places they were going. So in these language books or guidebooks that were given to our troops fighting in Europe or serving in Europe, we wanted to make sure they could speak the lingo a little bit better. So if they got lost, if they were hungry, if they were in trouble, or if they just wanted to be polite to the local civilian population, they would learn a few phrases in French, German, and Italian. It's not at all like the classes you take on languages today. It's all phonetic. That is, it's literally spelled out. So there's no grammar. There's no emphasis on of being fluent, of being able to speak the language well, but being able to be understood if you had an emergency, or again, you just wanted to be polite and wanted the Italian or French village or German town you were staying in, wanted to, have a better opinion of Americans. Always a good idea to ingratiate yourselves with the places you are. And we're going to look at one more item, and then I'll close today, and we'll hopefully have some questions. And again, you can put that into the Q&A, and we'll answer those, and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. If I don't have an answer, I'll say I don't know, but I'll find one of my great colleagues here at the museum who can find out the answer for you. Now, we have here in this bag, we see it stamped US on it, so we know it's from the United States. The language is also in English, so we can probably assume that it's from the United States. And there's even a size on it here that says medium adult. Let's unpack our bag and see what's inside.
Oh, Colin, Linda guessed right because she guessed that it might be a gas mask.
Linda, you are batting 1,000. You're absolutely right. This is a gas mask. Now, World War II, it has 2 in the title, right? So that tells you there was a World War I before it. So in World War I, the war that preceded World War II, between 1914 and 1918, both sides, the Allies and the Central Powers, used a lot of gas. Now, we're all used to wearing, or getting used to wearing our masks today, right? They wore these gas masks during World War I for a different reason. World War I saw the introduction of different types of gas that would harm or attack the lungs of anyone who breathed it in. talking about tear gas or mustard gas or phosgene. So these things could be very dangerous. They could even be deadly. They could blind you. They could choke you. They could kill you. So gas masks were issued in large numbers to people fighting in World War I. There was worry as well in World War II would see a resumption of gas warfare. And in limited instances it did, specifically the Japanese used it against the Chinese in Asia. But in Europe and the Pacific, and especially against American forces, gas warfare didn't happen on a large scale. Again, but gas masks were issued both to soldiers as well as to civilians on the home front, worried about the possibility of gas attack. Really scary stuff, you know, stuff you can't see. You can't see it coming towards you until maybe it's too late. So this is a medium adult U.S. Gas mask, and it's very cool, and it really shows you kind of like all the things that soldiers or even the civilians during World War II were issued. So again, I didn't show you everything in the museum or even everything that's in this Foot Locker, but we want to do these programs to, again, help support our teachers, help support learning of our student audiences, but also we want to help show off some of these cool things we have here at the National World War II Museum, and we want to interact with you in finding out what you think of them, and also what you think they might be used for or made out of. But like I said, that's the last artifact I was going to show in our program today. Kate, I was seeing if we had any questions that came in through our Q&A that they can try to stump me on again.
So it looks like we've got one last question, and it's more of a personal question,
Sure.
Colin. Out of the thousands of artifacts that we have here at the National World War II Museum, including the gas masks, in your opinion, what is the coolest one?
Oh, that's great. That's a question I can answer because it's all opinion based. One of my actually my favorite artifact here is, again, it's something that's on its surface may not look as cool as a machine gun or a plane. It's a high school yearbook, and it's a yearbook that shows Americans of Japanese ancestry or Japanese American citizens who have been uprooted from their homes on the West Coast. We were fighting against Japan as one of our enemies in World War II, but that fear of America's own citizens right after the attacks on Pearl Harbor in 1941, Americans started to worry about Japanese Americans, most of whom were citizens, about having, maybe they would be more loyal to their ancestral homeland of Japan, the United States. So these poor people were deprived of their rights, rounded up, and deported and incarcerated in a series of incarceration centers throughout the United States, mainly in the West, some here and two in Arkansas close to us. So we actually have a yearbook of these Japanese Americans trying to make normalcy of these abnormal conditions, uprooted from their homes in California, and trying to put together a community, and even putting together a school and a school yearbook to document their daily school life. So it's on display in our Arsenal Democracy Gallery. I love it, and I love working with our collection of yearbooks, and maybe we'll have some of our yearbooks on display for another one of these programs in the future.
Well, thank you, Colin, for coming today to the studio with this awesome trunk of artifacts. And to everyone out there who participated, Talon, Julia, Linda, you guys did an awesome job. And join us next Thursday for a little bit more of a STEM webinar with our STEM specialist, Mr. Rob Wallace. And same time, same place. And we look forward to seeing you back next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.